I was in the music business for the first half of my life. The digital download came along and forced me to start over at the age of 34. And after about 6 months of trying to figure out what I was going to do, all roads kind of pointed to real estate. Real estate, it's the final frontier where the average person has a real shot at getting really wealthy. When you borrow a depreciating asset, money, to purchase an appreciating asset, real estate, that actually puts you on the right side of inflation. So while inflation is eating everybody else up, it's actually making you wealthier.
Did you continue your agent business while building your own investment portfolio?
It was really just me learning the investment side while I was still being an agent. And once I got my first investment deal done, then I was like, I'm never representing anybody else in the transaction again as an agent.
It's a totally different equation when you stop thinking about it as how much individual money injections do I need in order to survive versus how much consistent recurring revenue can I build up through rental income. It's just a totally different way to think about it.
I can take the word passive, I can take the word income, I can put them together and kind of figure out what it means. But as an intention, being rich and wealthy was you need to make as much money as you can and stack your paper. That's what I thought rich was. And that brings me to the second thing that I learned was this new definition of wealth. It's not having a lot of money. It's just having more money come in each month than what it costs you to live, where that money is not directly tied to your direct involvement.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, the show where we help busy professionals build their own real estate side business they can operate in just 20 minutes a day. Today, I have a special interview with Matt Theriault from Epic Real Estate. Matt's background story is incredible. From his time as a Marine during Operation Desert Storm, a 15-year stint in the music industry, and a humbling reinvention of his life at age 34. After many trials and tribulations, Matt found his footing as an entrepreneur and real estate investor. He runs a popular YouTube channel and mentorship program where he helps investors get over the initial hurdles of investing and start their own portfolios of cash-flowing real estate. Without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, where we dive deep into the intersection of career, family, and finances. Learn the mindsets, tips, and strategies to help you on your personal journey to build a life of abundance and purpose for you and your family. Now here's your host, Aaron Amin. Today I have Matt Theriault from Epic Real Estate. Matt has a pretty incredible YouTube channel where he breaks down tons of current trends and lots of real estate investor education. He also runs a coaching program, and he has a very storied background. But before we dive into that, I would love for you to just give a quick introduction in your own words.
Cool. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I was in the music business for the first half of my life. The digital download came along and forced me to start over at the age of 34. And after about 6 months of trying to figure out what I was going to do, all roads kind of pointed to real estate. Started as a real estate agent and then decided that I'd rather make profits instead of commissions, and then turned into a real estate investor.
I love it. You're also in the Marine Corps, correct?
That's right. I was in there for almost 6 years.
Amazing. Yeah, there's so many investors that I've met, and some of the best investors that I've met actually have a military background. And I've always liked to pull on that thread a little bit because I think some of the common themes I see are the discipline and the ability to work as a team. There's just some common threads among those investors. I'm wondering, are there any parts from that chapter of your life that you think have really armed you as a real estate investor and an entrepreneur?
I think boot camp in general, like just going through that basic process, that was 4 months of basic training and then an extra month of Marine combat training. So during that process, just right in the beginning, it does a lot for your sense of common sense. You learn logic, right? And you learn, okay, you need to get that done. Well, no one's going to do it for you. That broom ain't going to sweep the floor all by itself. So there's a lot of that type of mentality when you're getting there. So I think that translates to civilian life and in business where others that didn't have it or weren't raised that way, they might be lacking and not knowing they're lacking. And I think also just everything in the Marines is a process, right? You have your desired outcome and you have the beginning point. You just take it one step at a time until the mission is accomplished, and you don't stop until it is. So if there were two things, those would probably be it.
Yeah. So now one other thing that we have in common is music industry. So I worked on the concert side. I was a concert promoter. I worked for the largest event producer in the world. I worked in the Las Vegas office, which is where you live now. And I worked in Seattle for a stint and then Las Vegas for a bit. But I think you were on the record side of the industry, correct?
Yeah. When I got out of high school, I got a gig for, I don't know if you remember, there's a rapper named Rodney O and Joe Cooley. And they gave me $1,000 for a beat that I made. And I was hooked. I was like, wow, I just programmed this little thing on this little toy in my bedroom and I got $1,000. And at the time, I think I was 17? That was a lot of money to me at the time, especially for doing something that would have done for free. And so that kind of planted a seed of like, let's just keep on doing it. So I kept meeting new people and getting paid and meeting new people, getting paid and meeting new people, getting paid. Then I got signed to a recording contract actually while I was in the Marine Corps. And that's another story if you want to go down that road of how I got out of the Marine Corps. But I did that as an artist, and then that didn't go anywhere. But I was able to arrange my own record label. I got major label distribution with EMI. So I had global distribution and did really well and made my million before I was 30.
Wow. Okay. So you made money on the artist side.
Yeah. So, well, I didn't make the real money until I became the label owner with the distribution deal. That's when I made the money.
Got it. You teed it up for me. So now I got to ask, how did you exit the Marines?
Oh, got it. It's funny because I was like, they weren't even this nice to Elvis Presley when he was in the Army, when he tried to get out. But while it was after a Desert Storm, Operation Desert Storm, which was like the quote unquote, the good war, where we kicked butt really fast and we came home and we're like America and everybody was euphoric and everyone was aligned and on the same side and everybody was happy. But that right when we got out of there, that's when I got the contract from the recording from EMI Records. And I'd said, wow, I can't go anywhere though, because I'm in this and I've had this amazing lifetime opportunity. So I just took that up to my sergeant and he says, wow, this is pretty cool. I don't know, you should go ask the captain. I don't got any say over this. So I went to the captain and the captain was, wow, this is the coolest thing I ever seen, but I can't do anything about it. So he sent me up to the colonel. The colonel said, wow, I ain't going to stand in your way. Let me set you up an appointment with the base general. So I went to the base general and then the general was like, you served your time and we appreciate your service. If you want to get out, I'll let you get out as long as you give me an autograph when you get there. And I was like, all right. So it was effortless. It was a breeze and you just signed the paper and he said, you're free to go. So that was like right at my 5-year mark.
And that's one way to run up the flagpole. It's probably pretty hard to work your way up the chain of command in the military any other way.
Yeah. Everyone was like so starstruck by this little piece of paper I had that had the EMI's logo at the top of it, this letterhead. And people are like, oh, wow, this looks so official. This is like Hollywood. Like most everybody in the military seems like they're from the Midwest or the South. So they don't have a lot of exposure to Los Angeles and Hollywood. So that was a really big deal to them. So I think that's probably what greased the wheels for me and got me up there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And so you already mentioned at the top, so disruption is the theme where the digital download came along. You'd made a lot of money. You had the major label distribution and then outside factors. It wasn't your own fault. Something came and disrupted the entire industry.
Never my fault, Aaron. But go ahead.
But so it sounds like things basically changed overnight. Is that?
It did change overnight because, we were a hip hop label, but we were like the independent, earthy, conscious type of hip hop. Because at the time it was all about NWA and gangster rap. So we weren't like the cool rap, at least for mainstream, as far as mainstream was concerned. But that audience, that independent audience, and it could have been rock music, could have been dance music. It was all the same. The people that embraced the independent music scene, they're the ones who embraced the digital download before anybody else. And they got onto, Napster was the big deal. And then there was all of the, what do they call those things? BitTorrent things that get down those things. And so all that computer sharing stuff. And it put us out of business in about 6 months. And we had no clue as to what happened because the music stores stopped buying our stuff. And then they started sending it back for returns and wanting credit and money back. And we're just like, wait a minute, we've been doing this a long time. No one has ever sent anything back. What is going on? And pretty soon, like I would say 6 months after we were out of business, almost every major record retailer in the industry was out of business. And this all happened before even iTunes had even formed yet. What happened really fast before mainstream even knew what happened. So in hindsight, it's crystal clear. But at the time, we were like, what is going on? This internet thing is no joke. This is what all we should think of.
Yeah.
But it just changed the way that people consume music.
Anybody who says they saw that coming is probably full of crap.
I didn't think there was a chance in hell people would not want to get in their car, drive to the store, look through all the bins and read the liner notes and smell the vinyl and the dust in the music store. That was such an experience. No way is any sort of internet ever going to replace that. Sure enough, immediately.
Yeah. So that was about 25 years ago, if I remember my timeline of Napster correctly.
Mhm.
And you got a taste of the 7-figure cash injection, a little bit of
Yeah.
glory, a little bit of glamour. And then you got more or less humbled by external forces. So
hmm
what did that kind of next chapter look like?
Well, right away, the wife didn't appreciate it. So she's, where's the paychecks? Where's all the money? How come we can't go out to eat as often? And so she didn't like that. So she took off and I got left with her debt. And then the bills were stacking up at the label. And so I had to file bankruptcy. I had no choice. It was funny at the time, like I kind of experienced a little bit during COVID too, where the economy is dealing blows to you and everyone that owes you money has a sob story of how the economy is terrible and you just have to like take it. And then everyone that you owe money to is F you pay me. But
Yeah.
so like the economy is impacting everybody. Why does everybody think I'm immune to it? And that's how I felt in the music business too. Like people stopped buying records. Like there's no money coming in anymore. And so if I had to file bankruptcy, which wasn't fun, and I went out to the job world looking for a job. I wasn't really qualified to do anything else. I hadn't trained to do anything else. All my skills in the Marine Corps was all DOS related when the whole world had gone to Windows by then. And so I went out and I tested the waters and everyone told me pretty quickly that I wasn't qualified for anything because I didn't have any like paper credentials. And so I worked as a temp, as a typist. I went to go try and sell cars. I tried to sell insurance. I went door knocking, selling magazines. And I was like, wow, is this what life is really going to be like now? So trying to just settle down to gather my composure, I started bagging groceries at the grocery store. And fortunately, they were on strike at the time. So they were hiring at $21 an hour. And my reference point to an hourly wage was when I was 16 years old. I'd get up at 4 a.m. and head to the golf course and put the golf carts out, go to school, come back and clean all the golf carts up and plug them back in and do that over and over again. But I was making $3.15 an hour then. So when I got this job for minimum wage at $21, like that's a whole lot more than I used to 20 years ago. That's not that bad. I just didn't do the math of what that would be on a 40-hour work week until you get your paycheck and you're like, hey, who's this guy FICA taking all of my money? You know what I mean? So I started working there and I was there for about 6 months, the biggest pity party ever. I was blaming everybody and everything for my situation in life and just really missed my money. I didn't like being broke. I didn't like being poor at all. And working 40, 50 hours a week to be broke was like, wow. And the grocery store manager, who was also 34 years old, this happened when I was 34. So he'd been pushing carts, bagging groceries there since he was 16 years old. So he was only 2 years away from being vested in his pension to where he could retire and withdraw 70% of that for the rest of his life. And I was like, God, this guy's all done. And I'm just starting. Like, it just seems so unfair. And he said, Matt, come here, let me show you something. And he said, along the way, I've been able to acquire a couple of apartment buildings. And the passive income from these apartment buildings is going to pay me more than what my pension is going to pay me. And then he said these words to me, which were the life-changing words. He said, real estate, it's the final frontier where the average person has a real shot at getting really wealthy. And I was like, the final frontier? I guess I can stop looking if this is it. Because, I was so down and out, I would have believed anything at the time. Thank God it was good advice. But he had also said for the final frontier for the average person. At that point in my life, at 34 years old, I felt far below average. And my self-esteem was like, who are you to aspire to be above that? So I did what I thought the logical thing to do was to go get a real estate license. Long story short, that's what I did. And after about a few years of that, I was like, I think if this is where all the money's at, I'm sitting on the wrong side of the desk. And so then I made this shift to become a real estate investor. So that's how that all came about.
Amazing. Well, first of all, it's never easy to be humbled like that and to have to take a step back. It probably would have been easier to get a $21 per hour job had you not made $1 million before that in the record business. Retracing and going back and starting over and then coming into a new profession and tracing through your own entrepreneurial journey. I imagine that you now have built it on a very solid foundation because of all the perspective that you gained riding that up and down earlier in your life. But yeah, the progression you just described where you got your license because maybe you thought that was the next logical choice. And then you realize that those commissions are ephemeral. They're injections, but they don't lead to residual income, right? And so
Correct.
you followed that into the investor side. So I guess chronologically, like how long did it take you to come to that conclusion that, hey, being an agent is great, but being an investor is better?
I was in Southern California. I started in Long Beach and then went up to San Pedro and then into Palos Verdes. If you're familiar with that area, I was getting into more and more expensive neighborhoods. So when you're getting a 6% on a $500,000 house versus a $2 million house, the $2 million house was better. And so in the beginning, I worked really hard and I did everything I could to be the best agent I could and just really studied and took it seriously. And I got Rookie of the Year my first year. And when you're getting somewhere between a 3 and 6% commission on a $2 million house, those are nice injections, right? That's a lot of money. But after a while, you're right. Your lifestyle typically will tend to rise to whatever you're making. And that became a hustle and a grind just to maintain that. And I had 2 clients that they were partners. They were fix and flippers. And we really connected. We really hit it off. We became buddies and I would find them deals. And anytime they found a deal, they'd send it over to me just to write up the paperwork, which was the best type of business ever. And I would just get paid by them just sending me stuff. And then there was one day, I remember it was on a Saturday and it was 10:30 in the morning. We had appointments scheduled. I showed up in my suit and tie as I always did. And they showed up about 20 minutes late. And they were in jeans and a t-shirt. And I had all their paperwork set out on the desk, ready for them to sign. They signed everything and then they took off for the weekend to go do whatever they're going to do. And I was left there to process the paperwork. I was left there to hold their house open the whole Saturday. And then Sunday I had to hold a different one of their houses open. And I was like, that's when I had that epiphany. I was like, this is not where the money's at. I want to do what they're doing. And I compared commissions to profits. And so that took me about 3.5 years, 4 years before it really sunk in. I was just fortunate enough where I was an agent, paid really, really well. So I didn't really notice it right away.
Yeah, I always think about this because I invest in a few different markets and one of them is a West Coast coastal expensive market. And another one is a Midwest, much more affordable market. The agents have to work just about the same amount and a commission on a $150,000 home sale versus a $800,000 or $1 million home. You do wonder, right? How do people make it in some of the less affordable markets? But I can see how those cash injections on a $1 million or a $2 million house that you might get hooked on it. And it'd be pretty hard to wean yourself off, even if you become an investor. So my next question is, did you run those in parallel? Did you continue your agent business while building your own investment portfolio? Or how did that kind of evolve?
They didn't overlap very long. And it was really just me learning the investment side while I was still being an agent. And once I got my first investment deal done, then I was like, I'm never representing anybody else in transaction again as an agent. And they didn't overlap very long at all. The work is kind of the same as far as generating business. You're prospecting. In many regards, you're in sales, right? So you got to go out there and you got to generate your own leads and you get to you get to kill what you eat or eat what you kill. Eat what you kill. So that part of it I was already used to as being an agent. So it wasn't that difficult for me to make that transition. But they're not the same thing by any means. They're totally different animals.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Remote Real Estate Academy, the community I launched last year where I personally coach investors and empower them to buy rental properties anywhere in the United States. My business partner Nathan and I have a collective 15 years experience with over 20 cash flowing out-of-state rental properties. We provide a step-by-step playbook on how you can build your own portfolio and start accessing the life-changing benefits of real estate investing starting today. Go to remoterealestateacademy.com for more info, or better yet, shoot me an email at aaron@aaronamin.com with subject line RREA, and I'll throw in a special bonus for podcast listeners who join the Academy. Now let's get to the show. One of the big parallels is you have to generate leads and conversations and interests. You have to nurture those leads, especially if you're going directly to a seller. You have to have some negotiation and sales skills. If you just want to buy one rental property, you don't necessarily need that much skill. You just need enough for a down payment and an agent that can get you across the finish line. But if you get into some of the stuff that I know you're into, like the creative finance and some of the off-market, there are some crossover skills, but like you said, it's still totally different games being a full-time agent versus trying to build something on your own. So how did the kind of first several years Trace us through, like, what was your buildup as an investor? Where did you start and where are you now?
Yeah. The first deal I got as an investor was driving for dollars. It was in Long Beach, California, Newport Avenue. I remember it. I don't remember the street number, but I remember exactly where it was. And I found that deal. And long story short, I was able to get it under contract and flip it to some fix and flippers. And I made $26,000 on that one, which was that was par for the course with what my commissions were at the time. But then it took me about 7 or 8 months before I got my next deal. And somewhere along those lines, I was introduced to this little book. I doubt if you've ever heard of it. You might want to write this down. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I got to work on my delivery on that because it's not the laughs I anticipated it would get. But got that book, and it introduced me to two things that were never anywhere in my ethos, in my sphere whatsoever. One, this concept of passive income, right? I speak English. I can take the word passive. I can take the word income. I can put them together and kind of figure out what it means. But as an intention, that was like a foreign concept because I just came out of the music business. Being rich and wealthy was, you need to make as much money as you can and stack your paper and get your bank account really big and fat. That's what I thought rich was. And that brings me to the second thing that I learned from the book was this new definition of wealth. It's not having a lot of money. It's just having more money come in each month than what it costs you to live, where that money is not directly tied to your direct involvement. And that rat race escape formula, let's get your passive income to exceed your monthly expenses. So those two things like really clicked. And I was like, okay, so now every time I saw a deal, it wasn't how much money can I make off of this? It's how big of a stream can I generate from it? And that kind of opened my eyes to a lot of opportunities I'd probably been passing up while I was looking for these big flips. Now I could pay, in some cases, I could pay retail or above retail and still arrange a deal that would cash flow for me. And that was like the big transition. And I met a guy at a Los Angeles RIA club, a Real Estate Investor Association club. And he had, 35 properties in Danville, Illinois. And I was like, I'd never heard of Danville, Illinois. I've never been there. But I was able to arrange a deal where I got him to carry back the financing on all 35 of those. And then I wholesaled half of them. So I put cash in my pocket. And from that cash, I was able to buy down the loans a little bit more and got those to cash flow. And after that deal, and there's just a couple more after that, I had escaped the rat race. This took me like 3.5 years to where my passive income was now over my monthly expenses. And I wasn't rich by any means, right? But I didn't have to work. And now having lived both lives, both definitions of wealth, having a lot of money in the bank, but having to go to work every day because I had to keep it up, right? And then not having a lot of money in the bank, but not having to work. I preferred the second one better. I preferred that one more. I liked it. I liked it without the pressure.
So a couple of things I heard there, right? One is you learned how to do wholesaling and flipping and some of this other stuff that is essentially active income. It's still cash injections. It's still one-time income. So there's no residuals, or in music industry terms, we learned about residuals with royalties and all this back-end revenue that you don't have to directly input. So flips and wholesale.
What's funny is you said those words residual and royalties, and it didn't even register until you pointed out that they were a music group. I was like, yeah, that's what we call it. Go ahead.
It was a little while ago. So
it was, but it didn't even register as like, are you talking about real estate anymore? And I was like, I know. Never mind. Go ahead.
But I like that kind of what you've done and the way you explained your story is that you combined all of them. So if you need a quick cash injection, you built the skill of how to wholesale. You built the skill of how to buy things on a portfolio. And even when you bought a portfolio of 35 properties, you figured out like, what's the best mix of things to do with this? I can wholesale some of them off. I can keep some of them and build that base of passive income. And like you said, it's a totally different equation when you stop thinking about it as how much individual money injections do I need in order to survive versus how much consistent recurring revenue can I build up through rental income. It's just a totally different way to think about it. And like you said, that the big purple book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, kind of seeds that idea in most investors. I think you're pretty hard pressed to find an investor that can't at some point reference that book and just the mindset shift that it unlocks in a lot of people. So I want to double click though on that one deal you mentioned. So you met this guy at a RIA event and you convinced him to sell you 35 properties. Tell us more about that. How did that conversation go?
Sure. Well, one of the things I didn't really like the idea My wife laughs when I say this, but I don't really like people, right? I don't like the whole idea of networking and having to go force myself to introduce myself to meet people and conjure up the small talk and make sure I don't sound stupid or boring. And that was just so much pressure to me. But hey, this is how you do it. It's a people business, right? And one guy said, every house you buy or sell is going to be from or to another person. So you better get used to it. And it would make me cringe having to go to these types of events because I wasn't really privy to marketing, right? The internet wasn't nearly what it is today. TV and radio were so far out of reach. It was so expensive at the time. And postcards, I was like, did people really read the postcards? Do they really respond? So it was 100% organic lead generating prospect or operation for me. So I'd go to these RIA meetings and I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand in front of the room because they always have this haves and wants section. So in the beginning of the meeting, you can form a little line up at the front of the room and you get to talk about here's what I got or here's what I want. You got the microphone in hand, you get to address the whole room all at once. I was like, that sounds way better than me going and introduce myself individually to all 100, 150 people in the room. So it's kind of like out of laziness is how I came up with this. So I would go to the day before or the day of the event, I'd go to Craigslist and I'd find somebody that had a house for sale. I'd call them up and I say, hey, I'm going to meet with a bunch of investors tonight. And there's probably a good chance I'll come across somebody who might have some interest in this. If I'm able to secure a buyer for you, would there be room for a referral fee on it for me? And how many times do you think somebody said no to me? Never. I never got a no. No one ever got a call like, hey, can I go find you a buyer? And so I would do that and said, great. So I'm just going to use the pictures here off of Craigslist. I'm going to make up my own little flyer. I'll put my own little contact information and I'll go share it. And if something pops, I'll let you know tomorrow. So every meeting, my whole intention was to show up with a property, with a deal. So when it's time for haves and wants, I'd stand up in front of the room. I had a little 3-step formula. I had one thing was called my audio business card. And it would be like, hi, my name is Matt. And I show busy professionals how to build a real estate portfolio in their spare time so they can retire early. So here's what I do. Here's who I serve. Here's how I help them. So I did that. And that was done inside of 7 seconds. Then I would talk about the property, but I'd only focus on, this is what made me different than everybody else. I'd only focus on what was in it for the actual investor. I think this property is available right now. It's 17% below market value, cash flows at a 9% cash on cash return. There's already property management in place, and I've been able to arrange creative or seller financing. So no banks are required. So everyone's there and there like, oh, returns and easy and convenience, opportunity. So I'd get everyone's attention just like that. And then, so part 3 of that would be give them a call to action. Yeah, great. So if you'd like some more information on this deal and others just like it, like just pretending I had a bunch of others, meet me in the back of the room. I'd be happy to give you a flyer. And that was it. In 45 seconds, I was done and had everybody salivating. I would just go back there into the room and I just wait for people to come back to me. So out of about 100, maybe 7, 8 people would come up to me every night. And I flipped a lot of properties that way, just doing that. And so this one guy, he was like, I've been watching you for a while. You come in here and you always got the deal. You're always hustling. Maybe you can do that from all of these 35 properties I have. So that's how I attracted the guy. And that's how he came up to me and asked me to do that for him. So long story, but that's how it happened.
No, that is amazing. Some real tactical gold there. And just being able to articulate like, what is the value that you're bringing and how are you bridging like different, you're seeing value in a deal, you're connecting people to that deal. Like you said, you mastered the delivery of that in such a way that even though you don't necessarily, I don't think anybody really likes going to those networking events and having this kind of transactional communication, but you found a good way to fight back against the worst parts of that and articulate your own value. And I think that, that was really good tactical advice for people, especially if they're going to go to events like that, if you don't want to feel awkward or like you're not getting anything.
And another really good tactic for those things that I discovered is do a little research on whoever's going to be speaking that night. Come up with 2, 3, maybe really heartfelt questions. That doesn't sound like an idiot type question, but if you have 2 or 3 well-planned questions and then sit in the front row. And when Q&A happens, raise your hand and stand up and then you ask your question loud in front of everybody. Oh my God, that attracts everybody to you afterwards. So that was always another way to get noticed at those things. So I didn't have to actually work the room. So those 2 things worked really well.
Absolutely. One of my favorite quotes, and I've heard it from a few different people, but it's much better to be the most interested person in the room than try and be the most interesting person. Usually
Sure.
that attracts a much better type of attention than the person who's just trying to get noticed.
Yeah.
It doesn't always go over very well.
I say that all the time in my training. I say, if you want to be interesting, be interested.
Yeah.
Right? Same thing.
100%. Let's start speaking of your program and the stuff that you do now. Tell us a bit about that. What you got your YouTube channel, you got your mentorship and coaching program. Tell us what you're all about.
So yeah, we're here. We're still full-time. My wife, when I say we, my wife and I, we're still full-time real estate investors. We probably flip 10 to 15 turnkey properties a month. Where still to this day, that busy professional is our ideal customer that wants real estate, but just doesn't want to get their hands dirty or doesn't want to do all that heavy lifting or doesn't even want to learn how or doesn't have the time. That's what she does on our business. And then we have another kind of sector of them that do want to get their hands dirty, do want to go out there and wheel and deal and stuff like that. And then they come to me. And so I show them how to do that. And she just does it for them. We've been doing that for a while now. And yeah, we've got the YouTube channel. We have the longest running real estate podcast. We started that in 2009 when nobody even knew what a podcast was. It was funny. Well, yeah, we have a podcast. I go, what? It's funny how it's just common knowledge today. But between those, yeah, we're here in Vegas. I love it here. We moved out of Southern California. I was tired of the taxes and the traffic. So here we are and got a 13-year-old son and life is good.
Awesome. Yeah. So the turnkey side of your business, do you guys run in-house property management too?
Well, we've come up with a system where we manage property managers. So we had a pretty good system there. So we're all through the Midwest and the South because that's where all the cash flow is. So we're in 9, maybe 10 markets right now. So we're able to just reach out to our teams in each one of those markets and get exclusives on these properties. And we get them first because we have been represented so much business to all of them in the past. And so whoever is in our queue gets to look at the properties first and they pick one and we arrange the property management. We handle the transaction. We arrange the financing and then hand it over to them on a silver platter and they can maintain the property manager we use or they can go find their own. It's their property. They call the shots. They can do whatever they want to do. But most people decide just to stay put and they experience a lot of favor with property managers because now we represent so much business to each property manager. So they get their strength and volume, I guess.
What do they call it? A captive vendor, right? When you represent a big chunk of their business, they don't want to let you down. They don't want to let your investors down. So
it's funny how expenses fall and performance increases.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I didn't realize that your business was spread across so many different markets. Do you also operate in Vegas?
Just started within the last 6 or 7 months. I've never been fortunate enough to live in a market that had the potential to cash flow. And so now I'm really enjoying it. We're actually selling a lot of our stuff out of state, consolidating and bringing so we can have some more investments here. But yeah, my own personal, Mercedes and our own personal acquisitions are done here in Vegas almost exclusively now.
Very cool. Yeah. So out of state investing is where my sweet spot is now. I lived in Las Vegas from 2015 to 2020. And so I saw that kind of meteoric rise. Vegas bottomed out, one of the hardest markets in the country during the Great Recession. And it also rebounded about as high. It took off during COVID time. So from the bottom to the top, it's quite a roller coaster. We're lucky to have bought some properties towards the end of the 2010s. People that bought in 2012 are even luckier, right? But it definitely is not an easy market to find cash flow in these days. And so, I have a similar mindset where I have some out-of-state properties that are less expensive and maybe packaging some of those and selling them off and then bringing it into a market with a little more potential like Vegas. Sounds like a compelling idea. What do you recommend for people? So I know you talk a lot on your channel about current trends. We're recording this in December 2024. The election's already played out. It's a pretty clear picture of kind of what at least some of the ideas behind the upcoming regulatory changes, tax changes. Where do you tell your audience to focus their time and attention these days, especially if they're just starting out?
Well, I definitely think houses are ever going to be more affordable than they are right now. I think the supply and demand is so imbalanced that it would take record building by new home builders for a decade for us to level out and create some equilibrium in the market. Now, there's lots of variables at play, and that could be totally wrong. And, a couple of years from now, I'd be happy to come and say, hey, I was totally wrong. But I don't foresee what is actually going to impact that. Everyone says, gosh, if you read all the trolls on my YouTube channel, they all think I'm an idiot and that the market's going to crash any second now. But they've been saying that now since 2015. Here we are 9 years later and the market was just about to crash, right? But the reason the market crashed in 2008 is because we had too many houses. It's particularly here in Vegas. It is completely overbuilt, but the population caught up to it. But after that time of 2008, 2009, 2010, there were so many builders that were wiped out and wounded that they're really cautious to come back into the market and start building again. They didn't want to experience that again. Those memories are fresh. And still for some of them today, that's why they've kind of slowed down. Like they don't want to overbuild now because they don't want to get in that same situation again. It's really hard for a real estate market to crash if you don't have a lot of houses on the market. There's nothing on the market. We're like, you hear it all the time, but we're kind of at historic lows when it comes to inventory and turnover. And then when that's just your natural supply and demand, just people to houses. But then if you look at the demographics of the people, so we have your millennials, which is the biggest generation in our population, and their peak age, I might be off a year or so. I've been saying this statistic for a couple of years. Their peak age, I believe, is right around 34 years old. And so there's more 34-year-olds walking the earth than any other age, is what that means. But the average age of the first-time home buyer is 36. So we're going to see over the next 24 months at least, I think long after that, but we're going to see more demand for housing than any other time in history. It's just, you got more people that are home buying age. So you have that one. The second thing is, depending on which numbers you read, but we had 10 to 15 million new people come over the southern border over the last 4 years. They need a place to live. They need roofs, right? Then you have the corporate demand. So you got the Red Rocks and the State Streets. And so now you have their demand coming in. So we have like the demand for housing is like just ginormous. There's just not enough houses. So I think we will become a nation of renters. I think those who own real estate, even if it's just one house, you're going to be an elite part of society, in my opinion. People will be like looking at you like, wow, Aaron, you own a house? Wait, you own 2 of them? I think it'll be like remarkable to people. And so I think that's where we're headed. I mean, either they just build more houses, and the only way they're going to do that is that the government makes it so easy and profitable and risk-free for builders to do. But that's asking a whole lot. The second place would be the government itself just builds houses and builds shelter. And I don't know if you've ever lived in government housing, that's not probably a good idea, right? Or 3, people are just going to have to change the way they live. And we're already starting to see that, like how we see in Europe, where you have multiple generations underneath one roof. So you got the grandparents and the parents and the grandkids, right? So you're seeing more and more of that. Or you're going to see a huge tiny house explosion. Elon Musk's whole $10,000 smart house. Other things are tiny, but that's what I mean by changing the way people live, the way that we can just build these things. They got the pop-up houses now that you can buy on Amazon. So those are what you're going to see. But even if those come in and they'll start putting shelter, look how much more amazing your single family house is going to look next to those. So I think it's only going to drive the value up and up and up. And like I said, we'll hit a speed bump here and there. But I think in the long run, put it this way. I was telling somebody that never in history, ever in history, has it been bad advice for me to tell you to buy a house. Only been bad advice to sell, right? It's never been bad advice. And I think that trend will continue.
No, I really like that. So a couple things. Also, the cost of labor and materials is crazy.
There's so much more. You're right. Yep.
Yes. So even if the government makes it easier from a permitting and licensing and incentive standpoint, there's still that kind of natural supply and demand of the actual materials that it takes to build a house. The replacement costs of houses is oftentimes exceeds the market value of the house in some markets. So there's a lot of headwinds here. And so I completely buy into your thesis that it is a great thing to own a single family home, especially one that can provide some sort of cash flow and make economic sense as a rental. But the question still becomes, how do you afford one even as an investor? So I know you're very into creative finance, but how does somebody who wants to start today who does not currently own real estate, how do they get in the game? And also, how is it different than when you started?
Mm-hmm. All right. So there's two ways that are like distinct, and there's lots of variables and variations of what I'm about to say. But the first way, just if you're going to maintain your job and you're not going to go out and be a hustler and a real estate investor, if you're not going to go do that, you can get an FHA loan, right? Up to 4 units. And that's a 3.5% down. In almost every market in the country, you can get, that's 10 grand, right? And if you can't save 10 grand, then you're not ready to buy a house anyway. So that's a bigger problem that you got than owning a house. So you could do that. And then there's probably 20 different down payment assistant programs out there that you can get. So you can get in for zero if you really want to. I put a whole book together on that. It's zerodownkit.com. It's just a free little PDF if you want to get that. But that'll like just someone that, okay, I just need to get my first house. Let me just get in the game, as you were saying. And it doesn't have to be your forever house. This is just a stepping stone, but it will get you in the game. And that house is going to appreciate with inflation to make it easier for you to get your next one. So that's your stepping stone in. The other way is to look for distressed properties. So properties are distressed or the owner is distressed, one or the other. You tend to get a much better deal when the owner themselves are in distress. And that represents about 7% of all transactions. 93% of all transactions will go through a real estate agent and be sold for market value. We're not talking about those. We're talking about the 7% that happen off market where people sell fast for cash at a big discount because they have to, because they have bigger fish to fry somewhere else. And so when you can negotiate directly with the seller that way, then now not just price, you can also negotiate terms, which is the big superpower that doesn't have me too worried about a window closing for me right away. But those are the two ways. So you can go the traditional route with some government assistance programs, or you can go out and learn the skill and do it directly with the seller.
So I'm putting on my skeptical new investor hat and saying, none of that sounds passive.
Yeah. No, it's not passive. That's not what you asked me. You asked me how to get in the game, right? So passive takes a lot of work to build. Okay. So you work hard a lot in the beginning so you don't have to later. So it's definitely a lot of work. I'm not saying it's easy by any means, but you're never going to get there unless you get the first one. And you could do this very easily on the side. You could be a full-time something else. Very easily do this on the side. Okay, I'm just going to go out. I'm going to buy a little duplex or fourplex, and I'm going to live in one and rent out the other 3. The FHA guidelines say you only have to live there for 2 years. That's what the guidelines say. I don't know how often they come around and check. Right? I would probably say never, but I'm going to keep everything nice and legal above board. Okay. So you got to live there for a minute, but then once you're in there, now you've gained some equity that you could probably withdraw or draw upon to get your next house. Now don't sell the fourplex or the duplex, or even if it's just a single family, don't sell that one. That's going to be a rental for you. And you're going to move up to the next one. And you're going to constantly do that every 2 or 3 years. And if you did that for 20 years, you would be light years ahead of the person that didn't. And the Department of Health and Human Services has a statistic that 95% of all 65-year-olds today cannot retire on their own investments and devices. 95%. All the people that are going to work for 40 years, they're maxing out their 401k, they're trying to pay off their house as fast as they possibly can. They're work, save, sacrifice, following the rules, waiting for compound interest to work its magic trick. And by the time you get there, then only 5% have actually made it following this traditional advice. So that's insanity to me.
Yeah, that is a horrific statistic. Forget retire early. How about retire at all, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The fact is most people just don't make enough to save enough for the compound interest thing to work. And most people don't start early enough for it to work either. There was just an article this weekend by Susie Orman, I think it was on Yahoo Finance. And it was her whole article counseling parents to get their teenagers to start saving for retirement right now because here's her exact words, because that's what our system requires. That's the advice of the financial planner, the TV guru is saying, you have to start talking to your kids at 14 because they need to start putting away 15% for the rest of their life. Because her exact words, because that's what the system requires. But you forget all that traditional hogwash Go ahead and just do a house every 2 or 3 years, and you're done in half the time. You're done in 20 years instead of 40 years by just barely getting out of first gear.
Yep. But the prevailing theme I'm hearing is that you got to start.
Got to start. Exactly. Yeah. And that's the big thing that stops people, because they'll look at a rental, like the houses that we sell here in our turnkey operation. They might only cash flow $150, $200 with traditional financing on it. And people look at that as like, why would I go all that trouble for just $200 a month? That's not even going to move the needle for people. But you have to get the first one in order for that to be worth $10,000 a month someday.
Yeah. Fast forward 10 years, the loan amortization picks up, the loan pay down accelerates, the appreciation, the rent growth, the tax benefits, all that stuff. Over time, it gets more powerful. It's not only about year one, the $2,400 a month in net cash flow you make that first year. It's the big picture over a long period of time.
Totally. And then what people don't understand, I didn't understand this till just, I don't know, in the last 5 or 6 years that I really get a grasp on it, is when you borrow a depreciating asset, money, to purchase an appreciating asset, real estate, that actually puts you on the right side of inflation. So while inflation is eating everybody else up, it's actually making you wealthier. That famous saying, don't fight the Fed. So don't fight the system is what they're really saying, because the system always wins. But when you borrow a depreciating asset to buy an appreciating asset, you are going with the system. So now you're on the winning side. So yes, the rents are going to increase and the buy down is going to get bigger and the houses are going to appreciate. But the inflation, your house is keeping up with inflation, even outpacing it a little bit. You can't find a better job. You're not getting an annual increase from your job that's keeping up with inflation. That little cost of living raise that everybody gets, inflation goes up 6% and they got a cost of living raise of 3%. You're still behind 3%. But your house keeps up.
That's a powerful argument, and I hope people heed that advice. Obviously, you and I are big believers in real estate. It's done a lot for both of us. Hopefully, there's a long runway left to go. Really appreciate the kind of economic argument and just some of the way that you phrase that. I think that's a powerful take that hopefully people internalize and take to heart, that there's not going to be a better time necessarily to get in. It's not going to get more affordable. If anything, it'll be a more compelling asset to own over a long time horizon. So I appreciate that perspective.
Amen to that. And it'll never be worth zero.
True. True. Even if it burns down, if you got insurance, it's never worth zero. Right?
It'll never be worth zero.
Yeah.
But ask all the Lehman Brothers investors.
Yeah. Well, Matt, it's been great talking to you. I would love for you to just share, where can my audience get in touch with you? I saw that people can even maybe apply to play 18 holes of golf with you. But where can people find you?
Oh, that'd be great. Golf with Matt. Epic Real Estate. So that's the website name. It's the YouTube channel. It's the podcast. However you're consuming this right now, you can find us there as well. Epic EPIC Real Estate. And that's how you do it.
I love it. I will link to everything in the show notes. So check that out. Go reach out to Matt. It's been a pleasure having you on. I learned a lot as well. And I hope to stay in touch and maybe have you on again in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. As you may know, podcasts are very difficult to grow organically. If you're getting value from today's episode, I'd deeply appreciate if you can take 30 seconds to leave my show a 5-star rating and review. This will go a long way to helping me reach more listeners just like you. Thank you so much in advance.